It's hard to believe it's November, yeah? It's like, man, where did summer go, right? I like the cooler weather, though. That's a nice change. Welcome, everyone, for being here. We're going to talk about, wow, so many good words there, yeah? We're going to talk about Jesus. We're going to talk about hurdles and the revolution. What do you guys think of when I say revolution or when you see that word? What comes to mind? Any idea? All right, cool. With a smile and like you're happy to revolt, yeah? I don't know. I think of the Boston Tea Party, right? The American Revolution, the French Revolution, right? Revolution to me always makes me think of angst or unhappiness or a strong desire to change, right? One side's not happy, the other side is, but maybe not. They're change. That's what comes to mind. Somebody's fighting for change. So we're not going to talk about wars, if you will, or strife from a political agenda. We're going to talk about that struggle within ourselves, hurdles that we create, hurdles that we have to overcome, ways to do that, and the things to avoid, the pitfalls, but not an actual war. And this, I think the battery's dead, so I'm just going to push the space bar. All right, so as we talk about this in perspective of a revolution, right? Things aren't perfect, right? Things aren't the way we want them, right? That's a great ingredient, a great recipe for this revolution. But just think about it internally in ourselves, right? We know that we were born, or created, I should say, the first time, totally lacking knowledge and simple, right? We know that each of us are on our own individual path, somewhere on this continuum of first time we were created, right? Our creation, simple and lacking knowledge, to this pure spirit, right? And everywhere in between. Hence the reason, although our bodies are made of the same material, we live in the same time, we are all at different levels of evolvement, if you will, on that path to perfection. Hence the reason why reincarnation to me makes so much sense, yeah? Because of these multiple lives, because of this progression, even though we're the same, we're at our own unique place in time where we've brought ourselves based on our previous choices. Imperfect, obviously, otherwise we wouldn't be here on earth necessarily. How many of you are happy with your progress? If you want to talk about it. You don't have to raise your hand. Some days I'm happy about my progress. Other days I'm not. And we'll talk more about that in a little bit. How many of you believe that we each could maybe do a little bit better job at living better? Is that a fair assessment? Yeah? Good. Because I think that's a premise here, yeah? There's definitely better ways to live, and each in our own way, doing our part to improve, but still making mistakes. But anyways, each of us are comprised of these components for this internal revolution. So, we're not going to fight, we're not going to have a political agenda, but we're simply fighting for our involvement, yeah? We face our biggest obstacle every day, right? It's called our pride, or our ego, right? On a daily basis, second by second, we are forced or obligated or inevitably we have to make choices. Are we going to go left or are we going to go right? Are we going to do the right thing or are we going to do the wrong thing? Or are we going to not do anything because we're frozen? We don't want to make a choice, right? Regardless of what we do, we are making a choice, whether we do nothing at all. And essentially, this pride or this ego is tied to desire, to tendencies. Think about the day we die, right? And we pass over to the other side. Does anything change about our spirit? Yes, our body evaporates, right? It's dead. It doesn't go with us. It gets cremated, goes in the ground, whatever we decide to do with that body. But our spirit, does our spirit automatically go from the level of involvement where we are right now to some elevation just because we die? No, right? Stays the same. those base tendencies, that character that we have passing this life, stay with us. And we come back, by the grace of God, we have no memory of the mistakes we made in most cases, right? I'm thankful for that. I think the guilt would be too much, perhaps. But those choices I made in previous lives that I have not atoned for or amended are here on my conscience. So I basically have to overcome those base tendencies all over again, or until I get it right. Does that make sense? Yeah? No, everybody's shaking their head. You guys want some coffee? No? I'm going to have some coffee. I'm sorry. I have to laugh otherwise. But take my word for it, right? We're overcoming ourselves, right? There's no doubt in my mind that we're our own worst enemy, and we just simply have to overcome that. So the opposite of pride or ego is humbleness, right? Humbleness simply puts us in a place where we don't neglect ourselves, we don't forget ourselves, but we don't put ourselves at the front of everything. We are not the center of the universe. We have the view of other people that we're equals, right? And that's not always easy, right? There are so many hierarchies in our society, in our life, in our mind, right? I'm better than you because of this. Oh man, they're better than me because they have that. I want to be like them. Oh, I wouldn't want to be like them, right? We do these things. It's a human thing. It's a societal thing. But when we're truly humble of heart, regardless of what we possess, regardless of our education, regardless of our status or lack thereof, we look at everybody the same, equal. We don't see color, we don't see philosophy, we don't judge haves or have-nots, right? We're equal. How many of us are there? I'm not completely. I judge on a regular basis. Not like I did a decade ago or 2 decades ago, but I'm still not to the point where I'm totally humble, right? The best example I can think of for what that'll feel like or look like when it's achieved is to be like Christ, right? I'm not there. I'm sorry, right? The best way to get more humble or achieve more humbleness of heart is not just thinking it, but doing it, right? Putting other people first, helping other people. I was driving down here today, and I was running late, so maybe a little faster than I should drive. But the guy in the right lane turned his turn signal on, and he wanted to come over, right? And I think he was shocked because I slowed down, and I let him in. I wouldn't have done that 10 years ago, right? So my point is, little things like that. Let other people get in front of you. Ignore or don't take to heart offenses that they might do to you. When somebody cuts you off, it's really easy to tell them they're number one, right? But let it go, right? Go with God now, is what I say. Most of the time, right? Sometimes I'm not that nice. But my point is, what the gospel is teaching us is the best way to counteract pride, the best way to reverse its impact, or to unloose or untie its control over us, is to be humble and to put other people first, to serve other people. Not to neglect yourself and be defenseless in that sense, but think of others as your equal and do unto others as you would have them do unto you, like Christ taught us. We good with that? Yeah? I got some head nods that time. This is good. All right. And this goes without question. Yeah? I think this makes total sense. Our pride totally repels humbleness, and it prevents compassion or reduces the likelihood of compassion. I think I've shared this with some of you before. Pride, ego, that 3-letter word, the EGO. Do you guys remember what I say that stands for? EGO, edging God out, right? If we're full of ego and pride and we're just thinking about ourselves, we're not living in Christ's light or his example or the way God would like us to live. I keep picking this up, but the battery's dead. So, what the gospel tells us is for the proud ones, right? I'm included in. I'm including myself in this, right? I'm proud, more than I'd like to be sometimes. They ask us, the mentors ask us, where were we before we became so mighty and powerful, right? better than others in our minds sometimes, right? More advanced or farther ahead, right? They remind us that wherever we are in this life, right? If we're judging or thinking that we're better off or more advanced than others, more than likely, right? We were in a much different situation in previous life. And more than likely we'll be in different situations, right? In the next life. We can always wind up, not digressing, right? Morally or character-wise or intelligence-wise, but our next life could very well be a lesson that we haven't overcome, so we kind of are guided with the help of our mentors and our own sculpting of our next existence. We might put ourselves in an extremely difficult situation where we are destitute, or we have no control over our body, or we have a very good mind but can't talk, right? Just some situation where we're totally reliant on other people to teach us humbleness, right? Could very easily do that. So they also tell us to drop our haughty brows. You know what that means? Like our nose is in the air. And we got that looking down on people, right? Drop that, right? Don't be like that. They remind us that as high as we get, right, as high as we achieve this pride thing and this material accomplishments, the higher we go, the harder the fall will be. We will be reminded of the reality that our choices or our pride, the things we do to advance, we'll lose that. We will be reminded of it. The more we get away from seeing everyone as equals, the more we get away from practicing the virtues that Christ taught us, the farther or the harder that fall will be. They remind us again that we're all the same. We may look different, we may be at different levels of development, but all spirits are made of the same matter, and all of our bodies are formed from the same matter. My dad always says, I remember I grew up in a what's the right word? I know how to say it in Portuguese. No, I'm just kidding. I don't know how to say it in Portuguese. I'm at a loss in English. It was a very diverse community. It was very, it was like lower middle class maybe. My mom will tell different stories of this, but my dad always taught me growing up that, hey, those guys on the other side of the tracks, they put their pants on the same way you do. Yeah, one leg at a time. So don't worry about what you have or don't have. Anyways, I digress. But his point and this point is we're all the same, regardless of where we live and what have you. We are all formed from the same material. They go on to tell us that our titles, our names mean nothing, okay? That doesn't mean you lose your intelligence or your education, if you will, but that diploma on the wall or that title behind your name or on your door, those things go away. Only thing that stays with you, right, in the grave, right, which doesn't stay in your body, it passes on, is that moral development. And those are the actions that you took, the thoughts that you had, the words that you said, the feelings and emotions behind them, and how you treated your fellow man, right? So we're reminded to live simply, right, simplistically, and love like Christ taught us to love. Because all this other stuff doesn't go with us. And just like the reading that you opened before our session tonight, right? This slide totally touches on that. How many of you thank God when bad things happen to you? Not all of us, yeah? It's hard. But that's what they're telling us, right? If you suffer insult from others, right? Injury of some kind that hurts our pride, right? We're instructed here. First, be indulgent of those people that hurt you. You don't have to invite them for dinner. You don't have to hug them. Don't wish them well. Don't seek revenge, right? Be indulgent of their faults and just realize they have their own challenges that they're overcoming, just like you do. And remember that you have your own faults. right? I'll never forget one of my first traffic tickets. That sounds terrible, eh? One of my first. I got a few. There's one highway patrolman on the turnpike. I know him on a first name basis now. Right? 3 tickets. It's terrible. But the point is, in one of my very first instances, I went to traffic school like they let you do. And I'll never forget the instructor. He says, how many of you don't think you should have had a ticket? So we all raised our hand, right? I'm not guilty, right? He says, well, listen, just think of it this way. Think of all those times you know you were speeding and nobody pulled you over, right? And it's true, right? Regardless of that one incident, we all had situations where we'd done something wrong and we just didn't get caught. So we all have our own faults. And by being indulgent of people that aren't necessarily treating us the best or may do us wrong, being indulgent of them, forgiving them, we're showing love and humbleness. And that's truly how we grow, right? By turning the other cheek, if you will. And remember, just because someone does something bad to you, right? How many times do they necessarily do it? That one event. One time, right? But every time we hold on to it, every time we think negatively about them, or we wish them revenge, we want revenge, or we talk badly about those people, right? We're reliving it each time in our brain, right? So that one event that hurt us, instead of forgiving and letting go, we hold on to creating resentment and reliving it every time we think about it. So we're encouraged not to let that happen, because all that does is foster resentment and anger, and takes us away from humbleness and simplicity, and drives us closer, or helps us drive with our pride as opposed to our heart. Simple enough? Yeah, to say, right? Simple enough to say. Hard to do all the time. All right, so the take-home message from this part in the gospel was essentially, it doesn't matter what people say about you. You know when you put your head on the pillow, like I do, the mistakes you made that day, the things you could have done better, right? You know the things that you did well, right? And you have the ability, if you have the ability to put your head on the pillow at night with a clean conscience, knowing that whatever people are saying or doing in the community about you, right or wrong, or if not true, you know that your conscience is clean. Don't worry about what people say about you. By withstanding the offenses, right, that people throw at you, you're becoming more humble. You're not giving in to the ego and chasing them and going after them. And the more you do this, the stronger you get. And you have this shield or this armor around you. Love is strong, right? Humbleness, repelling ego and pride, is strong. And the more we do this, the stronger we get, because of that faith in God and following that example. So this was a tough one for me when I read this. As they're explaining this chapter, the question asks us, does Christ have to come again for you to get this, right? To teach us humanity, right? To teach divine laws, right? Has humanity forgotten them? What do you think? Have we forgotten them? In some ways, yeah. Would you agree that it's a less violent world today than when Christ walked the earth? I think so. I do. I think little by little, even though terrible things happen still every day, I do think overall the world is less violent, less cruel. But we forget his lessons a lot. And then, if Christ were to walk the earth today, would we reject him like he was rejected over 2,000 years ago? I used to say, yeah, I think we would. I don't feel that way anymore, because I think I've changed internally, right? I do think, I think there would be issues, right? But I don't think he would be as rejected as much as he was back then. I think some of us would still accuse him of blasphemy, and maybe it would repeat, right? But I do think the world is changing for the better, and not everybody agrees with me, but I do think it's less violent, and I do think that he would be more accepted today. All right. Should we take a poll on that? We could get I'm kidding. All right. How many of us are surprised by this, right? Here we are, over 2,000 years later, right? Christ walked the earth for how many years? You probably know. Valdo, 33, 34 years?
2000.
No, how old? I mean, how many years was he alive and walked the earth?
33.
33. I knew you would know the answer. Thank you. 33 years he walked the earth, right? His existence on earth is immortalized around the world. His crucifixion especially. His final steps and words are with us. His teachings are with us. They've survived over 2,000 years. And how long has Spiritism been around? 150 what? Almost 160 years. And 160 years ago or so, we were gifted with, think about Christ's teachings, his good news, right? The gospel, right? The New Testament, as it's called. The Old Testament, right? The law, the Mosaic law, right? That was delivered to Moses. And the law of the land when Jesus walked the earth, right? Is the Old Testament. Think 160 years ago when the Spirit's book was written, when Allan Kardec took the time, the energy, and the effort to talk with mediums from all over and asked the questions, received the answers from spirits that had gone before us, right? And wrote the Spirit's book. And then the gospel, then the medium's book, and the rest in order I don't really know, right? But 5 incredible books, right? So now, in addition to the Gospels, and then the interpretations of those Gospels from elevated spirits, we are left today, over 2,000 years after his death, with a much clearer, better understanding, in a much better frame of mind and elevated consciousness than ever before, right? So it's with us. And it's spreading. And the world is responding in so many ways. What we have to remember, though, is these altars that they talk about in the Old Testament and the sacrifices, right? The calves that they would slaughter, or these golden statues of things that they would worship. One of the things that holds us back to really embrace the good news and the teachings that we study is that altar of pride, right? And we have to tear that down. And if we don't, it just slows down the progress. But the doctrine has survived. It's been interpreted even more in a more time-appropriate way, right? Because we have this understanding now. But we still build these altars and slow ourselves down. The gospel, whether you read it from cover to cover or just open a page, right, is filled with messages to help us wake up, to remind us of how to live, how Christ lived, his lessons. If we can spend more time, remember we talked about pride and reducing that with humbleness. One of the best ways to focus on humbleness and reduce our pride is to read things like the gospel on a daily basis. So what they're telling us here is if we can spend some time, embrace the gospel, read its message, we're going to draw towards us more positive energy, right? If we're full of ego, if we're full of pride, and we're spending our day and most of our time just believing that we can do everything and we don't need any help and it's all on us, right? It's harder to be humble. So if we can try to follow that example of Christ and read the gospel more, we're going to draw towards us positive energy, positive spirits, which is going to lift us up. And I like this right there. Let their words echo in your hearts. It's one thing to rationally and intellectually read a good message, right? But how often do you start off reading just to read, and the words on the page touch your heart, right? Whether it's fiction or the gospel, whatever. There's words evoke feelings and emotion. And when you read good, positive energy type stuff, right, like the gospel, those emotions, those stories will rise you up, raise you up, and you'll be more generous, more loving, and you'll do more good in the world. Make sense? Yeah? Good. So they remind us that little by little, we're going to tear down these altars that we create out of pride, live by the teachings of Christ, and that we'll stop questioning the goodness of God, right? We'll see the evidence, we'll see the proof more vividly and more easily. I can't speak for all of us, right? But I can remember earlier in life being mad at God at times, questioning God, not attending any type of religious service or study. And little by little, as that pain softened and as I exposed myself to more things like this, I no longer need any proof of God. I no longer need any proof to have faith. It just is getting easier and easier as the day continues. So that's the advice, right? To let that goodness in and do more of that. They tell us to make our hearts gentle and mild, and you'll wind up filling your path with laurels, placed to celebrate your return to the road of goodness, compassion, and love. How many of you on New Year's make a resolution, say, to get in shape or lose weight or quit smoking? A lot of us, right? We make these resolutions, right? And then you do really well, and then you get off track, right? And then at some point, you get back on track. You know that feeling like, yeah, and I'm doing it again, right? Or maybe it's a goal for your education, or it's a goal to save for something your family needs, right? You get on this path, and you're doing the good things. Then you stop for a while. Things change. But that feeling, when you get back on track, you know that feeling I'm talking about? That's what we want to strive for in our relationship with Christ, right? With our own evolvement, right? Our own destiny to follow in his path and to evolve. And if you can get more moments of where you're back on the track, that habit's going to get stronger and stronger. And it's going to be easier and easier to practice goodness, compassion, and love. One day at a time, right? So here's the part that slaps you in the face, right? Stop complaining, right? Stop. We created our problems, right? Right here it says, you have heaped them on yourself. You have ignored the saintly and divine ethic of Christ. So don't be surprised when the cup of wrongdoing overflows on all sides. That stings, doesn't it? To me it does, right? Because I know every day, right? I get up, first words out of my mouth is thank you, God, for another day, right? And I exercise, I eat breakfast with my family, my wife and I pull out the gospel or happy life or green light or trust, any one of these little books, right? That we have, remember that movie Sixth Sense not Sixth Sense, never mind. But the little girl had water all over the house and they couldn't figure out why. But then the water was what repelled the aliens. My point is, my house has got spiritist books like everywhere. Some in Portuguese, some in English, right? And it's like, if you can't find the one you're looking for, you're going to find one next to it, right? So we grab one of those. Even if I'm late and the kids got to go to school, it might only be 30 seconds, but we pull out a book, we open a page, and we read, even if it's one paragraph, because we made that commitment. And I got to tell you, that little action every day starts the day out right. And then I get off track. I get to work, I got an unhappy this or an unhappy that, or somebody didn't do this or I didn't do this, and I got a patient in front of me that, man, I didn't write a very good note. What am I doing? And it all works out. But my point is, I get off track, right? And then you become sensitive to that if you're really focusing on it. And you stop, you say a prayer, or the point I'm trying to make, right, this revolution that we're talking about tonight, right, Christ in our lives or Jesus in our lives. Life gets hard. Life gets tumultuous. There's turmoil, right? There's temptation. There's mistakes. There's drifting off of your intention to follow the light and actually following the light. But all it takes to have this quick turnaround is just a short prayer. A quick acknowledgement like, man, I can do better than that. And it's amazing to me. I tried this leading up to this talk for a couple of days. And life is easier when I think of Christ before I do something. If I put that idea, like what would Jesus do, in my head. And life is easier. It's anecdotal. I haven't done it for every day of my life, but I can attest that the last couple of days, by doing this, it definitely makes life easier. And it kind of grows, if you know what I mean. It becomes easier. All right, enough about me. This is another hard page to read in the book, right? And I can rationally tell you I believe this, but then when I think about it and I let it sink in, it hurts, right? Think about things that aren't right in your life. Don't spend a lot of time thinking about it. I don't want you guys to get down, right? But remember, whatever they are, if you can't find the reason for it in this life, it's an effect of something we've done in a previous life, right? And I know that's crazy sometimes to really believe that we all know people. Some of us are experiencing things right now, right, that we may not know, right? But there are people that are trapped in their bodies. They have a terminal disease. They live in conditions that are hard, right? And it's so easy to want to think that there's a black cloud over our head or the world's not treating us right. I have a friend in Philadelphia, had all kinds of challenges in her office. And she said to me, Alberto, God is mad at me, right? Because of this, and this, right? God is mad at me. And she may not necessarily think about stuff like this. I didn't go here, but my thought was, it's our fault. We bring all of this stuff on us, right? And our reaction to these events, to these predicaments, right? We can perpetuate the negative side of it, or we can elevate the positive. There's always a solution, right? Always. It may be daunting, it may be hard, it may seem impossible, but there's always a solution to every situation. May not be the one you want, or the first thing that comes to mind, but there's always a solution in a way out, if we drop our pride, yeah? All right, 2 more hours and I'm done, I promise. So what's the best way to overcome pride? Simple, right? But hard. Take Christ's law as your one rule of conduct. Stop placing greater value on things that please your eyes. That's huge, isn't it? Stop placing greater value on things that please your eyes than on those that please your soul. That's amazing. Wow. Is that easy? No way, man. It's not easy. But at the end of the day, it's the solution. It lessens our pain, it expedites our atonement, and it's going to make the advancement faster and less hard. But man, it's hard. You guys can do it, though. I got faith in you. Me? I'm not so sure sometimes, right? So, they remind us here in the gospel to cherish the godly person, right? How many of you have gotten rid of Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, all that social media stuff? Has anybody just turned it off? I'm so proud of you.
Never had it.
See? Good. But as I get involved in these, I'm in a couple different pages for work-related stuff, professional stuff, and I've got friends on there. What I find in that stuff, right, it's very easy to get caught up in celebrity or drama or everybody else's happy life, right? And this is a great piece for us, right? It's like they're telling us, think about the most saintly person you know, the most simple, the most loving, the most Christ-like person that you can think of that you've ever met, right? Was it that humble little old lady that you knew as a kid at church, or a nun? Was it Mother Teresa? Maybe it was your next-door neighbor. Maybe it was your mother. But think about that person. how often do we not praise or respect that person, right? They're simple. They might be poor, feeble. They might not seem like they have much, right? But man, they're so nice. They're so kind. They're always helping. We appreciate that, respect that. But oftentimes we idolize other things in life, right? And this is what they're telling us. Don't idolize fame and fortune and things like that. Honor and cherish the godly person, because that's the best example to follow. And the best example of that was Christ. Never forget, they tell us, that when our pride reaches an extreme, it indicates an imminent transformation for divine justice to correct the proud. Which means if you're on a path, right, of ascension, driven by your pride and your ego, you're going to hit a wall, right? You can fight it all you want and deny it and just keep going, but you will fall. And it says the higher you've risen, the worse your fall will be. Selfishness will ruin everything it has touched. So just obviously be aware of that. It doesn't go on forever. And then finally, we're asked, right? Humanity is asked to renew your courage. When life gets tough, when people do you wrong, when you feel like your back is against the wall or you have no options, just be strong. You've created the situation that puts you there. But God has given us a powerful cure for that, right? It's called the example of Christ, right? Apostles of Christ, right? The majority of them put to death, right, for their faith and for their work. They were called followers of the way, right? Before we were Christians, right? There were Christians. Apostles were called followers of the way. The people that followed Christ were followers of the way. So what this is telling us is you don't have to be crucified for your beliefs or stoned, right? But in your actions every day, if you can follow the example of Christ, be a follower of the way, even if it's just a little bit more and more each day, right? You're just trying, right, to follow the light. As you do this more diligently, and each time you do it, your burden is going to be lighter. Your sorrows will be less, and all of your struggles will lighten. Your load will lighten. So, I thank you for your time and attention for tonight, and I wish you well on your own personal revolution of Christ in your heart. Thank you.